Welcome back to Cover's Bracket Breakdown as we talk about Saturday's two Final Four matchups. All of this, of course, odds, props, spreads, totals, all provided by Bet365. We have two fantastic games on Saturday, Houston-Duke and then Florida-Auburn, that all-SEC matchup. Let's talk Houston-Duke first because I know our guy Douglas Farmer has a lot to say about the Houston Cougars. Doug, let her rip.
You know, they've been doing me pretty well. There's a reason I didn't miss a bet in the Elite Eight, and one of those reasons is my faith in the Houston Cougars defense. But I'm taking a slightly different tact right now. Right. I've been preaching their opposing team total unders for weeks, and they've been cashing for weeks. But I'm just going to take the game total under here. Total of under 136, available at neg 110 at Bet365. I will outright admit this is a little bit of a hedge. If anybody's offense is going to expose Houston's defense, it would be Duke's. I don't think they will, but there's a possibility. And so if I take this game total under 136, I protect myself from that a little bit. It's a whole pile of reasons. First of all, Houston games this season with a spread within 3 buckets, 10 games, 8 unders. In those same moments, Duke is 5-5. So right there, I've got a little bit of an under trend to trust. But mostly the biggest reason here to take this under is you look across the country. We talk tempo in all sorts of ways. We should talk about it more specifically offensively, defensively. On defense, Duke forces opponents the 5th longest possessions in the country. Opponents need a full 19 seconds on the average possession. Houston's totally okay with that. Houston plays slow. Houston averages 19.6 seconds of possession anyway. Duke is going to elongate those Houston possessions, and that will really slow this game down. Houston's defense, we know how I feel about it. We know that it's going to limit Duke's inside looks. You go look at a Duke shot heat map. It's all around the rim and a little bit on the perimeter. Well, Houston doesn't let you get inside. All of these items point toward an under in this game as it slows down, and Houston does what it does best in tight games.
And you and I were kind of bouncing around some ideas beforehand, and we said, like, for as great as Houston's defense is, Duke is no slouch defensively. Let's not take that away. And they put Mark Sears in a potato sack and left him in the dark in that Elite Eight game for sure. For me, and this kind of ties into what we're talking about here, is I went with Cooper Flagg. It was 19.5. That's where I bet it. It's now down to 18.5. It's still out there, 19.5 if you want to shop around, but 18.5. And I still feel like the under is a viable option here. I'm just going to give you a few numbers. I'm going to spurt off a few numbers. Bear with me. So Flagg had a player prop of 24.5 points versus Alabama. That was a team total of 91.5. Okay, makes sense. He had a 21.5 point prop against Arizona. Team total was 82.5. 19.5 point prop, team total 79 versus Baylor. 16.5 point prop, team total 86.5 versus Mount St. Mary's in the opener. 20.5 point prop, team total 84.5 in the Georgia Tech game where he hurt his ankle in the ACC tournament. And then that last game of the ACC play, 21.5 point prop, team total 85.5 versus UNC. The team total for this game for Duke is 70.5 points, which is a significant dip from those other bars for their last, 8 games, 9 games. However, his player prop is sitting at 19.5, 18.5 points. It just doesn't add up for me, especially with the way that, like you said, Houston wants to slow this down. Houston plays a lot of great defense, especially inside, and they crack down on points in the paint. They crack down on offensive rebound, second chance points. They slow things down. They crack down on fast break points. And if we look at Flagg, a lot of his output comes from those 3 factors. The models out there as high as 17. Mine says 15.5. Even if you just do the crude math and say, okay, he makes up this much percent of Duke's points per game, it just doesn't add up. It's still less than 16 points out there. And then I think they have a great option to throw at him. Joseph Tugler, 6'8" sophomore, big 230-pound body. He can push him around. A 7'6" wingspan as well too. And then this guy has taken on some of the best players in the country out of the Big 12. So I like the Cooper Flagg, even though it's down to 18.5. I like the under on this one, minus 110.
I was trying to keep up with your numbers there, and I apologize, producer Mick. I was so engrossed in numbers, I forgot to mute my mic as some sirens went by. I think if I got your numbers right,
you were whistling.
No. The average Cooper Flagg points compared to Duke team total should be about 24%. This game, it's north of 26. That's the simplest way of what you're saying there. They've added on half a point or a point compared to what it should be in his most recent games.
Yeah, especially against a top, and this is like, and now you're making a major step up in defense. This ain't goddamn Alabama for sure. And they have a guy that they can throw at him that's a proven stopper out there.
I think they have two guys. Don't underestimate Terrence Arkansas. He is an underappreciated defender, partially because he plays only about half of Houston's minutes, but he's another long physical defender who might slow down Cooper Flagg. We've seen somebody successfully do this, which I'm going to go ahead and kind of piggyback on you there. Say, hey, Houston +5. Bring it home one more time. Neg 105 at Bet365. Did I consider the +210? Yes. But we all already know I'm doing a moneyline rollover on the Cougars to win the national championship. I could just go ahead and take the +5 here today and have that +210 in the moneyline rollover. I keep looking at that Clemson game. When Clemson beat Duke, Duke went 12 of 31 on the inside, 38.7%. Cooper Flagg went 3 of 11, 27%. Compare those to 58% for Duke on the season, 52% for Flagg on the season. Clemson made them work on the interior. Houston has the 5th best 2-point field goal rate against in the country, 44.5%. If anybody's going to struggle, it might just be the number 1 overall draft pick, because this is what Houston excels at. We haven't seen a consensus number 1 overall draft pick make the national championship game since 2012. And I start to think there might be a reason for that. Their game at this point, it's so focused on these players. But when a defense focuses on them and has to go elsewhere, Flagg might struggle. That helps the +5. I also have to note, Houston is 7-1 outright this season in games decided by, since December 1st, in games decided by 6 points or fewer. Duke is 2-1. Duke just doesn't have as many reps in these moments. I think Houston really can keep this within 2 scores.
All right. So Rohit Pannaiya, put a whole bow on this Houston-Duke game for us here as we wrap up that initial Final Four matchup.
Yeah, I mean, if you like analytics, there's no way you could go against Houston in this spot. Looking around at all the different sites out there, Haslametrics has less than a point separating these teams. KenPom has Duke with a 2-point edge. And Bart Torvik actually has Houston with a 1-point edge. And you're seeing -5 on the board. That's pretty crazy. So if you look at the analytics, yeah, I mean, it seems like this line is way too big. I do like Duke to pull it off, though. I think matchup style, they've got some things going for them. They are going to have a tough time getting the ball inside, but they definitely have more options than the Vols did. And when the Vols had to settle for those really bad shots from the perimeter, they couldn't hit them. Duke has multiple players that can knock down tough outside shots. They also have multiple ball handlers who could break through Houston's press defense, get down the court before the Cougars could really set up their defense. Don't get me wrong. Blue Devils aren't, going to have a ton of points in this one. They're certainly going to see a down tick in their offensive performance, but they're built to have more success than any team that Houston has faced in a really long time. On the other side of the ball as well, I mean, you look at Houston and they struggle to shoot knockdown shots inside the arc, 282nd in the country in 2-point percentage. Blue Devils have the 3rd best 2-point defense. So I think it's a pretty good matchup for Duke to pull off the win, but I definitely would not be laying points with them. So what I'm looking at is a Duke money line, same game parlay with that Cooper Flagg prop, because I like Flagg to go under his points as well. I bet the under 19.5 as soon as it came out, down to 18.5, still like it. And the final play, LJ Cryer over 2.5 threes. He's gone over this number in 12 of his last 18 games, hitting at a 43% clip during that span. I mentioned that Duke is incredibly tough to score against inside, a little bit more vulnerable on the perimeter. I think Cryer is going to be setting up there and shooting a lot of threes. So this same game parlays +575, Duke money line, Cryer over 2.5 threes, as well as the under on Flagg's points. So I'm taking that.
Very good. All right.
I got to ask, Ro, how did it go for you last time you went against Kelvin Sampson and the Cougars? I don't remember.
It was over quick. It was quick and painless, I'll tell you that.
That's also Tennessee. I think Duke is a significantly better team than Tennessee and are better equipped to handle Houston's elite defense. I mean, Tennessee.
Very much so.
And
I like the Cryer play because, as I said before, Duke makes you take forever on your possession. There's going to be a few times where LJ Cryer just has to make a decision to put up from deep late, and that could be the additional 3 you need to get over that prop.
Is that it for Houston Duke bets? Did we get them all in?
I think so.
All right. So as a perfect segue, one of my other bets that I like, I know Doug wasn't crazy about it. He was like, I don't like it, but I respect it. And it's a little greasy alt spread parlay. You can take Houston up to +9. You could take Auburn up to +9. You can parlay those two alternative spreads. It comes out to even money. Now, as Rohit just alluded to, the game models for Houston-Duke, very, very tight. Most of those call for a Duke win. Some of them call for a Houston win. There's a few out there that actually call for a tie game, but the margin is no bigger than 3 points. And if we look at the game models for the Florida-Auburn game, it's very split as well, too. Some call for Florida, some call for Auburn. However, none of those margins are by more than 2 points. So you pump the pups up to +9, gets us well above those projections, gives us a lot of buffer compared to the actual spreads. But it also gets us over some of the key numbers in college basketball betting, the 5.5, the 7.5 that we normally see. And over the last 17 tournaments, there have been just 8 Final Four games decided by double digits. Need I remind you, these are number 1 seeds versus number 1 seeds. There is no Cinderella. There is no sleeper here. We're talking the best of the best. So that alt spread parlay, Auburn +9, Houston +9, it comes out to even money at Bet365. Doug, you hate to love it.
I understand each individual play. I will never condone staking one bet on another bet where there is absolutely nothing tying them together. You can talk me into many, many same game parlays, but you are putting together 2 events that have nothing to do with each other.
But they have a lot to do with what you like in these games. And that's what we roll into. That can be our little segue into what do you like for Auburn and Florida?
Well, I went Houston +5, and part of the reason was my moneyline rollover. Part of the reason was I did not want to have 2 moneyline underdogs in our Final Four show because, yes, I'm taking the Auburn Tigers at +130 at Bet365. There's just too much value not to take it. Auburn was an 11-point favorite at home against Florida in early February, and Auburn lost. But for this game to now move 13.5 points in 2 months is far too much. Yes, if you look at since February 8th, Bar Torvik considers Florida to be slightly better than Auburn. I acknowledge this, but 2.5 points is too many. Auburn was the number 1 team for most of the year in the number 1 conference. And now look, I loudly said I was a little scared off by Auburn in early March. I was getting off my priors. I bet Creighton +9 on this show. Auburn covered there, even a little bit lackluster in doing so. Then dominated Michigan late, took care of Michigan State. We need to acknowledge that maybe Auburn got tired of having the target on its back and has now re-engaged. People are going to worry about Johni Broome's injury, and I understand that. But he has 6 days to get right. 6 days can be a long time when you're 22 and have every piece of medicine at your disposal. This spread is simply too high at +2.5. This money line is too high at +130. Give me Auburn. Give me Bruce Pearl +130 to reach the national championship game.
Oh, baby. And Broome back at practice, 100%. Just joking around with the reporters. Sounds like he's going to be okay on this one. Rohit Pannaiya, what do you like in this Auburn-Florida game?
I'm going head-to-head with Doug again. I'm laying the points with the Gators, -2.5. It's interesting. When you look back at that previous game where the Gators won 90-81, kind of went back, looked at my notes for that game. Great game. A lot of the times when you're looking at previous results, there are some outlier numbers that can kind of skew how you're breaking down the matchup moving forward. But there weren't really any outliers in that game. Neither team was particularly hot from deep. Neither of them went cold from deep. Weren't a ton of turnovers on either side. Free throws were about the same for both teams. They were tied when it came down to rebounds. Florida was just better. Auburn actually got off to a pretty good start in that game. They were up 15-5 early. Gators were actually kind of cold off the get-go. And then once they picked things up, they had a double-digit lead for almost the entire second half. And that was without Elijah Martin in the jungle. Now you're going to a neutral site. They've got Elijah Martin. And I think that the Tigers' offense has kind of dropped off a little bit since that game. We've seen them kind of have these poor offensive stagnant sets over the last month. And that in particular has really showed up when you look at the guys on the perimeter. Guys like Miles Kelly, guys like Chad Baker-Mazara. They are really struggling. Baker-Mazara has gone below 10 points in 7 of his last 8 games. Kelly's averaging just 6 points per game over his last 3 contests. So I think there's a lot of reasons to think that, Auburn's offense just quite isn't up to snuff here. They've gone below their team total in 7 of their last 8 games. And Florida has just been an over machine. So, you've got an Auburn offense that's underperforming. You've got a Florida offense that's been on fire. And I think you have a Florida team that right now is kind of cruising on both sides of the ball. So I think I like Florida to win. I like them to cover as well. It is a bit of a weird number, but I think it might come down to free throws at the end. But I think the Gators end up knocking them down and pulling away.
That's going to be a lot of fun to watch again. You two going at each other. I love it.
I'm not going to point out that one of these teams impressed in the second weekend of the tournament and one of these teams has struggled in 2 of its last 3 games. I'm not going to point that out.
I will say that
the Michigan game
recently, Auburn has looked stronger than compared.
Michigan State, that's about it.
And then Florida has had these moments where they especially on defense, where they're allowing a lot of high percentage looks at the rim. Like, were they lucky to get by TTU?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. We're gonna find out. For these, I have 2 player props for this game. I'm not going to get involved in this who's going to win, who's going to cover, because I'm going to take the cowardly way out and take 2 player props. But you mentioned the Florida Auburn game from February 8th. Alex Condon, forward for the Florida Gators, had a fantastic showing in that one. 17 points, 7 to 10 shooting. Did a great job. Now, you mentioned Martin being out. Perhaps he got a couple more looks, but he took it to the Tigers front court and played a really good game, got to the foul line, scored some points. Condon has been quiet in the NCAA tournament, mainly because the last 2 games he's been playing on a bum wheel. Hurt his ankle in the Sweet 16, battled through, and was very limited in terms of his scoring output in those games. But as Doug said, there's got 6 days here to get right. And Condon has been kind of dealing with this nagging ankle injury since mid-February. So this is probably the healthiest we're going to see him in a long, long time. But he's a guy that can step out. He's involved in the pick and roll. I think that's going to be the primary way that they attack Auburn and test Broome's legs, is kind of see if they can stretch him out as well too. His player prop markets range from 10.5 to 13.5, mostly. Most of them on the high of 11.5. However, this one here is 10.5. minus 115. Projections sit around 10 points, but I don't think they're accounting for how healthy he's going to be. And this is a guy who can put up big numbers for them. So I think we're getting a good number on Condon to have another great game against Auburn. And then I'm going to go to Johni Broome, and I'm going to go over 10.5 rebounds. It's at even money. He's had 11 plus rebounds in all 4 of the NCAA games. He's gone over 10.5 boards in 5 of the 6 postseason games for Auburn. He grabbed 11 boards against Florida in that February 8th meeting. And I think this game is going to be played at a quicker pace compared to some of their past opponents. So there's going to be a lot more shots going up, a lot more rebounding opportunities. And player projections were really bullish on Broome entering this game. A lot of them calling for about 13 boards. So a lot of headroom to play with the 10.5. How is his elbow? How is his leg? He says he's 100%. He says he's fine. And so I'm going to ride with that. So Johni Broome over 10.5 rebounds, even money, which I was surprised at.
Yeah, I'm on that as well. I like the over 10.5 boards for Johni Broome as well. Love that play. Like you mentioned, fast tempo in this game. One thing I will mention about the previous matchup, is you said he had 11 boards. He did that in 30 minutes, which is pretty impressive because this game is going to come down to the wire. It should be a good one, should be very close. Mm-hmm. And I don't see him playing less than 36 minutes unless he's hurt.
Yeah, so that's the thing. Unless it flares up again, he's got to leave it all out there.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing too is like that elbow, I was a little bit concerned how he looked. He's kept going to his left when he came back into the game. I think, maybe that affects him on offense. I don't think it's going to affect him in terms of rebounding or the effort he's going to be putting out of the boards, right?
He still pulled down like 3 rebounds with one hand against MSU. Like he was just scooping it up and pulling it down.
And I think he's in for a big game. Like you said, that tempo is huge and he's going to play a ton of minutes. And that Florida, they rotate a ton of bigs there, so they're going to need him on the floor.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really interested to see how his mobility and if Florida really tests his mobility. If he's as hurt as some people thought he was, maybe he isn't as bad. Douglas Farmer, thoughts?
I suspect I'm going to have a personal bet joining you on that rebounding prop. When that elbow injury occurred on Sunday, the people I was watching with, like, how can you say that's no big deal? Like, it's not his shoulder. His elbow is a new thing. If he had re-injured his shoulder on that play, we'd be, I don't know if he'd be able to play this weekend. That was a huge relief for me. The way he was grabbing his elbow and it was clearly an elbow moment. That is encouraging for him moving forward. Maybe we're getting it at even money because of skepticism about his health, about his ability to play this game. And at that point, let's take the value.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to get ahead of some health issues here. I'm saying Condon's a little bit healthier than expected, and Broome likely a little bit healthier than expected. Is that it, gentlemen? Any other wagers for this Florida Auburn game?
That's it for me.
I'll stick with my money line.
All right, so stay tuned to obviously the Twitter accounts for both Ro and Doug as they go head to head in that matchup, and be sure to follow Covers on X at Covers for all of our plays heading into the Final Four games this weekend, and then we will be back. I think we'll be having a show on Sunday, getting ready for Monday's national championship game. Until then, best of luck with your bets and enjoy the games.